In conversation with me today is Zohra Sooliman, the co-founder of the Gift of the Givers Foundation and the director of the Gift of the Givers Careline counselling service. This conversation is part of a series of conversations that I am engaging in to determine the role of women in responding to crisis situations and to look at how women are helping to restitch the fabric of South African society so that they can create a space for all people to inhabit their full humanity. Communication between government agencies and society at large is crucial for the management of crisis, to get buy-in and to, of course, earn legitimacy to act on the plans. And a key component of this is trust. I chat to Zohra Sooliman to hear what she has to say about building humanity and trust in a very fractured, hopeless, and volatile South Africa. So thank you, Zohra, for being here with us and for making this time. I'm sure that what you're going to contribute will be very meaningful in terms of this research, especially because you're a dynamic woman in a very, very contested space, I would say, and you're dealing on a large scale and every day with a diverse cohort of people. And that requires a lot of maneuvering. It requires a lot of wisdom in your interaction. And of course, it requires the feminine touches, I would say, because women are very good at multitasking. Now, in South Africa, if you look at South Africa, there's a culture of violence. And in order to change this, and of course, the very toxic space in which we find ourselves now as a result of state capture, corruption, and where people are losing ethical values, we need a mass of courageous people willing to reimagine the norms of our society. And that is coming out very strongly in the work that you do and in the work that Gift of the Givers is doing. Tell us a little bit about your role in Gift of the Givers and the other dimension that you are involved in, because on the one hand, we know Gift of the Givers is run by Dr. Sooliman, and we know that his is the humanitarian intervention, the actual, nitty-gritty of the work, but you're touching a very different aspect in terms of the organization. So share a little bit of that with us.
So when we started the Gift of the Givers in 1992, officially, where it was given its name, it was around that time that I used to find people coming with lots of social and psychological, emotional kinds of problems, but they didn't have an avenue for them or a forum for them to address these issues from a culturally sensitive and religiously sensitive perspective. So I realized immediately that there was a niche for that, where the support was needed for women, children, the vulnerable in the community, and even men, because I'm talking about a time that it was pre-democracy. And so we were still living in our little pockets, Muslims on their own, other religions. We lived amongst people with multi-religions, but racially we were separated into our different pockets. And along the years, I think with apartheid, that has really caused the damage where the different groups don't understand each other from their cultural perspectives, from their religious perspectives, and things like that. So I would find that women in the Indian and Muslim community would experience similar challenges, such as betrayal or unfaithfulness in a marriage, or gambling, or substance abuse, or any of those kinds of psychosocial dilemmas. And people assume that being Muslim, we don't have these problems, that we are immune to these problems. But we are human beings, and we're part of the society, and we coexist with everybody. So we are also equally susceptible to these kind of issues. So even the Muslim people, although the religion is there, but people need to be understood in terms of empathy, not being judged, giving them that unconditional acceptance, and for them to come and bear their souls out and able to speak about the issues with the aim of remedying the problems that they experience. with that, I found that there was a need to set up a counseling service. Not just a counseling service, but one that everyone had access to. So it was something that couldn't be expensive. And I think the larger population in South Africa cannot afford the luxury of going for psychotherapy. So we had to make this kind of service accessible to the majority of our population. We also have this aspect in our community where women, especially if they're in abusive partner relationships, they aren't able to leave the house often, or they cannot make calls. At that time, we still used to have the telecom lines. Cell phones wasn't that rife. And so people were still using, even although our service was for free, and because we have the toll-free line, but if the husband who is paying the account for the telephone decides, okay, where are the calls being made to, even on a toll-free number, he could ask Telkom for an itemized billing, and he would realize that his wife has been calling the care line and maybe discussing the issue and the challenges that she was finding herself in. And then the abuse would just exacerbate. So then we made it a toll-free line. And I think a toll-free line does not get listed on the itemized billing. So when we started out, it was a telephone service, free, and then we progressed onto a toll-free number so that these numbers would not appear on the itemized billing, and giving women access and freedom to the services that they need to help them with the challenges that they experience, to access the therapy that they need for themselves and for their children, and to move forward from there without having the fear that they will get caught by their husband, or that they will be exposed.
So that is, of course, many things that you had to consider and bring to the fore to realize this whole concept of trying to help people. And you spoke about pre-1994, and so post-1994, we have this change in our democratic dispensation. Societies are more intermingled. There is I suppose, a cross-cultural, cross-religious, cross-race kind of a system of living, etc. And you're faced with a slowly changing kind of a landscape in South Africa. So as an African woman, do you think that your approach to interventions in times of crisis and conflict is impacted by particular ideals that are implicit to your cultural background? So you being you, from your particular setting, your particular upbringing, your particular socialization, etc., does your cultural, social, religious, educational background impact on the way in which you intervene in times of crisis and conflict?
I think definitely. I think, that is who shapes us and makes us. And that is the person you are wherever you are. You can't be, a different persona in one place. And that it's our values, our culture, our religion, our upbringing, and our socialization. All of it has an impact on the way we interact on a personal level, interpersonal level, in the workplace, in the community, society at large. So definitely it has an impact. And I think having that understanding and that background is very, very important. So to quote an example, in the early days of the Gift of the Givers, I would get cases like where women would say that, if their husbands have been unfaithful in the relationship, and if they had to go to agencies that were existing at the time, and I don't want to name them, but there are many agencies that do offer this free confidential counseling. But we were post-democracy, but there was a lot of changes and learning that had to happen before we understand each other. I mean, just overnight with the dispensation changing didn't mean that the next day we all just this rainbow nation just gelled and were able to interact with each other seamlessly. It was an adjustment phase. We were going through a major adjustment phase. We were learning each other. There was suspicion amongst the group. You had to build trust amongst the group. There was so much that had to be done. And so I was seeing the symptoms of that coming up. So if they had to go and use the services of such an agency, immediately they were judged. Oh, but your religion allows more than one wife. In your religion, this is what it's preached, that you're not supposed to be unfaithful, and yet you are. So instead of the woman going out there, receiving the warmth, the empathy that she so much needs in her situation, she was actually being judged. And in a way, having to account for her religion, putting her in a very difficult spot, because now she's got to answer for her religion. And as I said, these are problems that are across the racial, what should I say, across the board of societies, despite what race you are, what religion, what culture, whatever it was. But problems, if there's a betrayal, a woman in a Muslim marriage that suffers a betrayal feels exactly the same as a woman in a non-Muslim marriage, whether she's in the white race group or the colored race group or the black race group. The feelings of betrayal are the same. So it needs to be dealt with from, I mean, you're asking in which way does my culture or my religion have an impact on that? And then, of course, my training in psychology as well. So, I mean, you treat everybody, whether they're a substance abuser, whether they're the perpetrator in the abusive relationship, whether it's just somebody experiencing grief or maybe just depression. The principles that you extend to your clients and to the people that come to you, it's the same. So you will still extend the same warmth, empathy, respect, dignity, non-judgmental, and positive regard for everybody.
So this must have also been a shock to many people who were attuned to a belief or indoctrinated into the belief that, you know, Muslims are like this or Indians are like that, coming from a very diverse racial background, of course, and the fact that apartheid has caused huge psychosocial, trauma to much of the population. And you speak about the issues of trust, lack of trust, empathy or a lack of empathy, etc. How did you then, channel these very, very conflicting situations, disturbing perspectives, interpersonal relations, etc., in the way in which people reacted to or responded to each other, to pull them towards an understanding that we're all human, that we can help each other, that we work together on the basis of our humanity, not on the basis of our culture, ethnicity, religion, etc.
Exactly. So I think it was a huge learning journey from that time. With all of these adjustments that our rainbow nation was going through, we still had to blend the colors of the rainbow. It just didn't flow that easily. So there was a lot of learning that needed to happen, a lot of connecting. And the way that had to happen was if we integrated and engaged with like-minded organizations who were doing, who were reaching out to people, but not having the self-righteous attitude that we know what's right for the people. And so we've got our approach, and that is what we're going to use in this organization. We equally had to learn about others. As I say, they didn't know, if I had to call it a them and a us, which I don't like, but as they had to learn about Islam and the religion and the culture, because in Islam, the Indian culture I would say the Malaysian, Indonesian culture, the Arab culture, all of that is very blended here in South Africa. It's not a homogeneous society where we've come from one country and just inherited that sort of culture, history, whatever. We've come from different countries, and we are this melting pot in South Africa. And so we all had to learn about each other in the same way that others had to learn about the Islamic way of procedure of doing things. We equally had to understand how other race groups and ethnic groups were operating and functioning, so that we also do not judge them. And I'd give you an example. Let's say if we've seen a client where a woman was grieving for the loss of her husband or her child or any family member. And in the Black community, the African community, there's a lot of traditions before the actual funeral, very unlike the Muslim community, where we would do the burial within a few hours, and the burial is complete, and then the grieving starts. With the African community, there's a lot of they have night vigils before the funeral. They've got to go in, they sit in mourning with blankets around them. They also burn whatever is in the house, even if it's in a good condition, but that is their understanding and their culture. And then also the funerals are quite expensive, and they have to feed a lot of people after that, and it's quite a costly affair. And something, of course, I didn't understand, but I had to question myself. Who am I to stand here and judge? I need to learn and understand that process, because going through those processes gives the person who is mourning and grieving closure. It helps them, irrespective of my thinking that, why are you incurring expenses when you don't have the money, or things that it taught me a lot. Learning I'm giving you one example, but then you have so many other cultures where you encountered them with different challenges in their lives, and they had to go through certain ceremonial processes, which I had to learn about, and we as an organization had to learn about. And I think it was once we started to learn about each other, we were starting to form the bridges, with the communities.
You raise some. Sorry, you raise some powerful points, and it's all of it. If I can put it succinctly, I would say it's a decolonial lens. The recognition that you stop speaking on behalf of others and making decisions on behalf of others, but rather take that step back and let them speak for themselves, let them explain for themselves, and let them take ownership for themselves. And you should have the humility to then recognize what it is that serves them best, and then try and help them in that particular way. So that way you get a more holistic response, and that's a very dynamic approach. I think it's something that we are arguing for in terms of an African approach to mediation as well, is to stop imposing the Eurocentric version of mediation or understanding of mediation as liberal peace, etc., but rather look at it as decolonial peace, the shift to social justice, to allow people to come together, to make their own decisions, find their own solutions. And I'm sure that this must have played a huge part in the whole process of healing that you encounter on a daily basis, but also in shifting the mindset of people to a recognition that they matter, that I, as a human being, for the longest of time, who was told that you are nothing, you are inferior, etc., there's now an understanding that I do matter, that I have an identity, and yes, there is an opportunity for me to exist in this place called South Africa with dignity.
Absolutely. I mean, the Bill of Rights and all of that was drafted up when the new constitution was drawn up. Chapter 2 is the Bill of Rights. And I think it's line 2 or 3 that says every human being has the right to respect, dignity, right to education. And it's quite a long paragraph. But I think it's on the basis that was the crux of it. When we interact, to say to people, you have equal rights as I have. I mean, there's no one more superior, no one inferior. And when that journey of, I'm coming to you to meet you where you are, and then to make that connection and that understanding, and then of course things opened up, and the trust levels were increased. People knew that, the suspicions, those barriers were removed slowly, not immediately, but it was a long process. And also that as a Muslim woman in the workplace or in I would say a public sphere, there's so many preconceptions about a Muslim woman, about the way she dresses. First of all, I wear my hijab and I go out there. So again, how do you reach out to people? How do you, open up to people? And first they see you, this woman with the scarf, probably quite modestly dressed, and they already have a concept of who you are. And then it's only when you start speaking and interacting with them that they realize, but you know what? This is not who I was told Muslim women are, or this is not what I was told the religion of Islam is. I mean, they had misconceptions about fundamentalism and terrorism and all of those isms that were there in the early 90s and just pre-democracy. And so I, as a woman, also felt that it's my role and responsibility that in my work and in my engagement with people to also correct those misconceptions and to show them that Islam is a religion of peace. And it's a very charitable, philanthropic religion. 3/4 of the Quran talks about how we engage with human beings. I mean, there's just a small portion about laws of, when you talk about strict laws of inheritance and exact, steps and protocols to follow. But most of it deals with human engagement. And even although we have our rituals, praying 5 times a day, doing the fundamentals of going for Hajj and fasting and paying your alms, but more than that, what is emphasized is about how you interact with the next human being. Because if you can engage with them at a human level and give them that respect and that dignity, understand where they're coming from, and address the issue in the way that is needed, then you're making a difference. Because you can be praying 5 times a day, you can be following all the rituals, but if you can't engage at this level, at a human level, giving people respect and dignity, then all of that is wasted, in my opinion.
No, and that is a very dynamic opinion, something that I think, that needs to come to the front more if we look at the complete erosion of ethical values, morality, respect that is now becoming very dominant in most liberal democratic societies, because liberalism, modernity, etc., has taken away spirituality from people. It came with this whole notion of enlightenment, but the enlightenment was scientific, it was secular, it separated, spirituality from the being of the human and from their interactions. And yet it is, in many opinion, and I think since COVID, and you felt this as well in our discussions, you said that there is this upsurge, this uptake amongst people in a search for spirituality, because spirituality, whichever it may be, whichever God you pray to, however you're praying, whatever, what you're seeking, but this search for spirituality is something that is grounding people. So do you find that, in your experience as a woman, is there room for you to channel these values, the spirituality, in the processes and in the interventions that you engage in, even if it is simply just in the way in which you interact? Because I know that Gift of the Givers is not a religious organization per se. You don't go out there and say, we are Muslim, etc. You focus on the task at hand. You're a humanitarian organization. Humanity comes first, And so, but in this notion of humanity, is there a sense of the spirituality infiltrating and guiding the way in which you interact with others?
So definitely. I think coming from that religious background and both in my marriage, from Imtiaz's family background and my family background, we had that spiritual augmentation in our religion. We are not just cut and dried Muslims who followed the rules and followed the rituals. There was a spiritual aspect to the way we lived. And from both sides, our parents and our ancestors were very charitable, very philanthropic to their neighbors. I mean, this was pre democracy, and yet, as Indian business people, we cared for those communities that were our customers. I'm talking about our parents' businesses, right? And in the way we saw them, conduct their business, giving people credit, knowing people didn't have money, they may never be able to come and settle that account with you. And they had all kinds of challenges, funerals, and they ran out of money, unemployment, but they needed to take things on account. And we saw how our parents conducted their businesses and had that sense of humanity, that compassion, that mercy towards another human being. It filtered down to us. So definitely in the work that we do as an organization, it is there. But then to add to that, I have to say that the spiritual root, the roots of Gift of the Givers is a spiritual one, because it started off with our journey when we stopped in Turkey on another mission, and per chance we met our teacher. And one of the things he said at that time was that the Prophet came as a mercy unto all of creation, not just to Muslims. And that changed the whole mindset. Because, I mean, we were young, in our mid-20s, when we encountered our Sufi teacher. And Islam in South Africa is a very prescriptive way of practicing the religion. And here we are, two young adults out in the world there, observing something. We don't even know if this is right or wrong. But then you get this man, he's a sage. You can see it all over him, from the glow on his face, from the sparkle in his eyes, from you can feel his heart reaching out to you. And he says, the Prophet came as a mercy unto all of creation, not just Arab, not just Muslim. And that changes your whole mindset and opens up all the blinkers. And you start looking at everybody as a human being, as a common humanity. And that, you know what, we are here to serve everybody. So I know I get carried away when I talk. I'm not sure if I answered your
question. No. That is perfect. And before I get distracted, there's two things that you raised here, and I want to touch the first thing, where you spoke about the ethical values of business people of the past, meaning your parents, your grandparents, etc. And I know that Gift of the Givers is not a business organization, but I just would like a quick comment in terms of businesses. Do you think that business today in South Africa should take a role in terms of the way in which they conduct themselves, raise the ethical, the bar of ethical engagement and trade, etc., and business across the board, not only just Muslim business people now I'm talking about, because there are many businesses that have been involved in state capture. So obviously state capture doesn't happen in its own. There is somebody on the other side, there's a recipient, and in most instances it has been business partners, as we've seen the names that have been thrown out by the media. So both in terms of business and even NGOs, because I mean, and sadly the rot has permeated right across the board, from NGOs, business, church partners, civil society organizations, education systems, and normal places of employment, etc., we find that ethics has disappeared, morality has disappeared. So do you think that there is an urgent need amongst South Africans to revisit these issues in terms of reinfusing themselves? And is this something that you are actively doing in the message of hope that you share with South Africans, encouraging them to come together, to build together, to work together, and not wait for everybody else to do the job, but get involved, dirty your hands yourself?
Exactly. So whilst that is there, but I think there's also a simultaneous sort of awakening amongst the business houses, amongst the people, the citizens of South Africa, that have become aware that we can't sit and wait for things to happen. I think in over 20 odd years, with our democracy nearly being 30 years old, we have been terribly disappointed in what we've seen. And of course, lots of corporates involved there as well. And you can understand that, politics is dirty, business it's all about greed and self-enriching and self-aggrandizement and things like that. But I think there is definitely that awareness and awakening amongst the citizens as well as the corporates and the business houses to say that we need to give back. This is our country. We cannot stand back and watch this thing fail us and fall away and end up like other African countries on the continent. We need to do something ourselves. And so you are finding people who are rolling up their sleeves and getting involved in things like going and finding schools that need refurbishing, hospitals that need refurbishing, roads, communities putting in water and other infrastructure. So now you're getting that coming from the public, from the corporate sector, and from active citizenry. It's happening. It's not happening in all places, but in our work, wherever we go, that is the kind of ethic that we promote and advocate. Because we say to people, this is our country. It doesn't belong to the ANC. It never belonged to the apartheid government. This is our country. We need to do this for ourselves. And so whatever we can do in our small little corners, in our small little circles and networks, whatever we do, can you imagine the exponential effect of that if everyone does it? So that's what we do. We are promoting and advocating for this kind of active citizenry and that sort of social responsibility from the corporate sector. And we're getting it. We're really getting it.
So you have been very involved, heavily involved in schools, in taking, different kinds of assistance, whether it's audiology or if it's speech therapy, in terms of skills, psychosocial skills, etc., to students in the different schools that are suffering from a lack of this kind of assistance. Do you find that there is a space for you as a woman to articulate this? Or is it that people only take this message when it comes from a man, for example, from your partner, from your husband, Dr. Sooliman? So do you get the same kind of resonance, the same kind of attention? Are people willing to hear what women have to say, what women have to offer, and basically act on this? Or is there a challenge for you to always first assert yourself as a woman and then to get the kind of response that you need?
I think people have been very receptive and very responsive to what I have to give them a grounds for why I am proposing something. For example, in the school that I'm working at, there's quite a strong male presence in the management, but they could understand where I'm coming from, where I understand these children are at in their lives. And I try to put this across very strongly that if we change the condition of these children in the school, giving them a chance at life, it can change the whole dynamics in the family. Mm-hmm. It can change the whole dynamics of that community. It can change the direction, the trajectory from poverty, from being uneducated and unemployed. It can change that. Even if one person is educated and given a chance to move on and get some meaningful employment, make a contribution back into the community, and not just from that one child, but the school as a support for the community. So I found that it was very well received. And in this case, the principal and his male members were equally open and receptive to the other female members on the management team, where they could understand clearly we are coming from that motherly, nurturing perspective. We want to see the best in every child, like we want to see in our child. We want to give them the best opportunity at life, like we would like to give our child. And so I didn't find any resistance. However, I must say that I think being associated with somebody like Imtiaz Sooliman, who heads the organization, and people edify, he can mobilize. Whatever is done at Gift of the Givers, I think it's very important to say this, that nothing is done by Imtiaz alone, or by me alone, or by a few people. It's done with a very dynamic team. Imtiaz might decide, okay, there's a cyclone in Mozambique, but he is not literally there himself. It's the teams that are going there. It's the search and rescue team that's going there. It's the team that's going there with the food and food delivery and all the other basic things that they need. If there's medical help that's needed, a team of doctors with different specialities will go. Later on, if there's need for psychosocial containment and counseling, then the trauma team will go in. So alhamdulillah, we are made of we've got different sectors to the organization that make this happen. Of course, Imtiaz is the one who will decide. Yes, we are intervening in Mozambique or in Malawi or wherever the crisis is at the moment. And then the teams are mobilized.
So how do you then, obviously, so you're facing with very many dynamic, challenges. You're also a changing environment, constantly changing environment. And there's the global sphere and the way in which the world is also evolving, you can see that there is a shift. There's a big change in mindsets. There's a change in responses and attitudes. And people are also, on a large scale, I think citizens are pushing back. They're no more sitting back and being complacent about the way in which they are so-called controlled and ruled anymore, because citizens recognize and realize that they live in representative democracies and that the government is supposed to be serving them, and it's not that they are subjects of the state, but they are actual citizens with rights and responsibilities. Now, if you look at your different experiences from the different conflicts, the crisis, if you look at the UKZN looting, and you were right in the center of it all, you also had sleepless nights, etc., and the unrest that happened there. Then the floods, I mean, you were smack bang in the middle of that as well, in Pietermaritzburg. And then you had the issues of the drought and almost ground zero in the Western Cape, and of course still water issues throughout the country, sanitation, yes, Eastern and sanitation issues, etc. And then you yourself personally have been involved in trauma counseling, very actively involved in Gaza, in Palestine. You went to Turkey, you've been to the earthquake in Pakistan, etc. And you have put in certain interventions into place. Each of these is a different experience. How do you use the knowledge and the experience, because you're encountering different cultures, different traumas, different issues, different sets of a vast, diverse range of issues. Do you learn from each experience, come back, reflect on it, and then apply it to the next intervention case? Do you, in your mind, or do you sit down and make policy interventions, etc., so that there can be some form of succession when Zohra Sooliman is not here, etc.? You know, how do you respond to all of this?
So to go back to the first part, which is a very, very important point, working with diverse countries, diverse populations, diverse cultures. When we go in, and quite often this is the approach of NGOs, where when they go in, they think, well, the saviors have arrived. They've come there to save the nation. They've come there with the food and the resources and what have you. And so they have a right to decide how that's going to be distributed over the people and how they're even going to use it. In a way, like, I brought this, now you listen to me, I'm going to tell you how to do it and why you're going to do it. And I think that's the first thing that we have learned, that when you go into a community, you go there with the utmost respect for them. It might be that these people have been hit by a disaster, natural or war, but that doesn't mean that they've lost all their values and their cultural and their traditions and things like that. So when you go in, you make it very clear, I'm here only to support what is needed. You work alongside the people that are already working there in the country. You don't want, as I said, we don't want this hero mentality. We've come here, we coming to save you people, and then you can't be there forever. 2 weeks later, you're gone. And if you go in with that attitude, you're leaving those people in a worse off position than they were. It would have been better that had you not even gone in the first place. So you go there, you show them the absolute respect, and that they know that they people, they understand the terrain, they understand the language, the traditions, and everything. And you ask them, how do I enter your community? You show them that by asking them those questions. They realize, you know what, these people respect us. We are important. We matter. It doesn't matter that we've experienced this disaster and the trauma that they've just experienced, because usually when you experience a trauma, it shifts your whole perception on life. Suddenly you think, you know what, the way everything is destroyed, I'm destroyed with this, and I'm nothing. And so you need to give them that hope. You need to rebuild what they've had, even if it's the rubble. People can pick up from the rubble and rebuild. So to use the analogy of the rubble, you use the same thing with building up their self-esteem, their confidence. If you're working particularly in a psychosocial context, then it will be specifically to that area, but you're building them up again. And you work, like you question and you check with them all the time. Is this okay? Am I, is it not out of your cultural practice or things like that? So working with them like that, I think, first of all, it builds the trust immediately, and they will be willing to support you and your work in setting your structures up there. And working like that has actually resulted in many of the countries where we have intervened, where we actually now have our own Gift of the Givers offices, but run by their staff from the country, because they understand the terrain, they understand the people, they understand the culture, they understand the food taste, a simple thing like food taste, what to give them. Sometimes we feel, oh, I'm giving them milli meal, they should just eat it. Beggars shouldn't be choosers. But I mean, if you're going to India and you gave them milli meal, it's not something that's part of their staple diet. They want to eat rice. So it's so many small details and aspects that you got to enter these communities with care and respect, and that's how you work with them, because that's how you show them, you are human, and I respect you, and the same way as I would expect respect to myself. So yeah.
So do you think then, finally, as a woman, that when it comes to taking decisions and how to intervene, how to react, how to respond, how to engage with the community, do you think there's a difference between the way in which a woman engages and the way in which a man engages? Or is it that specifically in your type of a role as an NGO, when you take on that mantle, when you take on the responsibility, you shun the gender and you step into the human shoes and you look at everything through that empathetic, spiritual upbringing that you had, and then you make your decisions accordingly?
I think it's very much, I won't say it's completely exclusive to a female gender to extend that compassion and empathy and that, because I have seen very many males who can be very, very compassionate, very, very soft, gentle. But in the NGO sector, you will also get people amongst us where you will get the male who just wants to get the task done. Then they're not getting involved with relationships and other aspects of it. They need to get something into the area, and they are very logistical about it, and they do that. And then you get people like us who have to now enter the community at this level. And so I think when it comes to the psychosocial, emotional support, then I think women are more equipped, better equipped to deal with that aspect, being softer, being more nurturing, being more motherly, being able to extend more compassion, empathy. I think that does sort of fall more onto a female role. It's not necessarily that you step into that role simply because you're now holding a position in an NGO. I mean, even in our NGO, we have staff, but from amongst us, we also know the extent to which some of us are more able to reach out at that level. And then there are others who are very efficient in what they do, but they might not, go down to that level. But in what they have to do, they're very efficient and get work done.
So that brings me to a very important aspect of governance, I think. So, and I have to touch on this, and I'm not sure if you're able to comment, but I would like to hear just your feelings about it. What I'm hearing from you is humility first in the way in which the organization should be, maintained, developed, and the way in which it proceeds. Secondly, a recognition of the limitations of each individual, as well as the capacity and capability of individual. And thirdly, a recognition of who to approach and whose help to seek, and realize that, you're not an expert in everything, that you can facilitate, yes, but if you want the best results, it's best to seek help. So it's about building solidarity, building alliances, asking for help and not being shy to ask, having the humility to recognize that, somebody can do something better than I can. This is totally lacking, unfortunately, in the way in which government is run today. So we have ministers in place who have absolutely no understanding of the portfolios that they are holding. They put in place individuals who are technocrats, who have no relationship with the societies in which they're engaging. If one just looks at the climate control, climate justice report that was developed, for example, does not recognize the impact on poor communities, etc. It's a whole report based on liberal values. I'm not taking the context of Africa and our history into account. And it, of course, it favors, still large monopoly capital, etc., and exploitation. At the same time, also, there's right across the board, we see a shortage of humility in terms of those who lead us. So when you look at the political landscape and you see this rupture between the citizens and the state, and you see the way in which you're engaged with the large population and the way in which the population and now the corporate sector, increasingly different civil society organizations are beginning to work together, embodying these values of humility, of trust, of social cohesion, of good governance, seeking to do better, which is totally opposite to what the state is doing at the moment. Do you find that there is a new social compact that is being developed on the ground between citizens and non-state actors, and that the state is largely being isolated from the way in which South Africans are beginning to view their life in this country?
I would say yes and no to that question, simply because I think if you're talking about the higher levels of government, yes, you are getting sort of that disconnect between them and the citizens of South Africa. But then because we work a lot with government. And so at the lower levels, if you can say the foot soldiers, you get a lot of good people amongst them as well, who realize the kind of, they're aware of what and recognize what's happening in government. But at least you do still get the good people in there who are working there because they've got the interests of the population at heart. And so I think because we as NGOs, we also engage with governments and other organizations at the same time, you can't write the government off, because there are people like this who are still willing to work with their heart and give people their best, and like you said, knowing and recognizing where you are limited and using the support structures and resources of other organizations, other NGOs, even if it is a government department, to come and augment the work that needs to be done. And I think that's where we need to go. We need to start realizing, look, we can't be everything to everyone. Even as Gift of the Givers, I know we seem to be, we're there before the government even comes in. And we are able to provide at various levels, whether it's medical, whether it's psychosocial, whether it's with basic food and when it comes to just basic structures in their communities, to just give them that sort of dignity and buy them some more time until government steps in, because government, before they have their meetings and decide about the budget, these people are they already in the flood or in the cyclone or in the drought, and how long can they go without water, or being caught up in water that's already infested, and then there's the danger of cholera, and you've got to think about so many things, and you've got to think fast. You really got to think fast in this field, because if you're going to start having meetings and deliberating over these things, you know what, the situation is just getting worse. But like I said, so gift of the givers somehow in South Africa is known as, like, you know what, government has failed us. By the time they come, at least gift of the givers, we know they'll be there. But even with all that, we have limitations on our resources from a financial perspective, material perspective, human perspective, and in many aspects. And I think we all need to work and understand the strengths of other organizations, other sectors in the community, and work together and in synergy for the best interests of our people.
That is actually a very dynamic note to end on. So I'm going to ask you as a parting question, what do you think are the most important values that we need to re-inculcate in society today and to build hope, especially amongst the young people?
I think it starts off firstly with sincerity. I think you need to ask yourself, why am I here? What am I doing this for? And then, if you know why you are there, then you've got to make sure that whatever you do, you work with honesty and a sense of accountability, and making sure that whatever you do, you're using the resources to the maximum, because you are accountable to the donor and to the receiving community. And I think to sum all of that up means that you're going to work in integrity.
Thank you very much for that, Zohra. And I think what you've put together in a very concise way is, articulating how we create the space for all people to inhabit their full humanity. Thank you for sharing this time with me and for sharing your expert observations and experiences. And we hope that there are many other people who are listening to this, and hopefully the young generation who will research this particular work will begin to realize the importance of integrity, honesty, sincerity, accountability. Thank you again, Zohra, and have a good day.